Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Knowledge Bank webinar. Today's session is being presented by Alistair Scott from MRI Software, and he is going to be speaking to you about service charge invoices and compliance in 2025. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get through as many as possible at the end of the session. The webinar is also being recorded today, so if there is anyone that is unable to join us live, it will be available to watch back via the News on the Block YouTube channel. That is all from me. I am now going to hand you over to Alistair to begin the webinar.
Perfect. Thank you, Vicky. And thanks to you and again to News on the Block for having us on the webinar today, and for really looking forward to kind of going through service charge invoicing and compliance in 2025 and start to look at how we're utilizing AI tools, automation, and really machine learning to help solve some of those hidden challenges. So let's kick off. So firstly, I guess just to introduce myself very quickly. So my name's Alistair Scott. I'm a solutions architect at MRI Software, or sales engineer. I'll go under a few different titles, a few different job titles, but essentially I've been with MRI for around 3.5 years now. And in that time I've gained really invaluable industry knowledge and experience, particularly in the residential and BTR and block management sectors alongside that. So I work closely with our clients to not only help them to solve pain points and overcome challenges that they face in the industry, but crucially as well to keep up with the ever-changing laws and legislations and many changes that happen in the UK property market. So really my areas of expertise include service charge management, lease administration, and property accounting alongside that. Okay, so this is the agenda for today. So I'll do a little bit of a brief introduction to MRI Software as well for anyone that doesn't know about us, but crucially what we want to go through today is how the landscape of service charge is changing. We'll look at some of those industry trends, changes in the workforce and legislation, and how that's starting to affect the block management industry as a whole. We'll then go into more detail on some of those hidden challenges, including in the invoice processing part of that. We'll look at challenges around coding invoices accurately, and also real-time visibility of data and the approval process. We'll then also cover some of those staff shortages that I mentioned and knowledge gaps that we're finding in the sector. So these are some of the examples that MRI's noticed when speaking to clients and operators, but it's something that I'm sure is impacting many on this webinar and within the wider industry. And then finally, we'll have a look at how AI and machine learning automation tools are starting to help solve those challenges, helping to ease burden on service charge accountants and invoice processors, and in some case, improve data accuracy across the AP process. There is time at the end for questions, but feel free to drop any in the chat as we're going through. Me or Vicky, and then potentially one of my colleagues who will be joining us, will be able to go through and answer those, or we'll cover those at the end of the session today. Okay, so just a bit on MRI. So we're a leading global provider in prop tech solutions. We were first founded in America in 1971, which means we've been serving the real estate community for just over 50 years. And we've since grown to become a global business with offices in the UK, Ireland, US, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. And we've got over 3,000 employees, with 1,200 permanently based in the UK, including the King Street office in London, which I'm usually based at. And we pride ourselves in providing solutions across the entire property sector, from accounting to facilities management, energy management, or housing. And we have around 52 clients, or 52,000 clients, I should say, worldwide. So it's likely that today most of you will have interacted with a building owned or managed by one of our customers. And some of you on the call today may be clients of ours in some capacity. So let's just start going into some of those industry challenges, the changes of the landscape of service charge, and look at some of those challenges that we see people are facing. Now, I guess just to highlight as well, the big Building Safety Act is one big change that's impacted block management and service charge accountants, and is something that building managers are not only having to remediate through physical works, but they also need to account for that and potentially recharge to their leaseholders and then report that back to their clients. And we'll look at how the expectations of leaseholders is growing and how they require more transparency of building costs and spending during that process. So as I'm sure everyone on the call is very familiar with, the block management industry is facing a lot of pressure right now with tight regulations, rising tenant expectations that are becoming increasingly digital first, staffing shortages, and increasing operational complexity within portfolios. So accounts teams are expected to do more with less resource, really, and while maintaining transparency and speed as well. So insights from our recent Property Leaders Forum, which we held, also confirmed that these pressures with industry leaders, highlighting growing challenges around cost transparency, regulatory fatigue, and the need for scalable technology, crucially. The Building Safety Act introduced a framework to ensure that safety of high-risk residential buildings, and it creates new responsibilities for managing agents, for landlords, making sure they appoint an accountable person to maintain a building safety case. So these responsibilities can result in new cost lines, for example, safety case preparation, remedial works, and engagement activities. And often a lot of those are recovered during service charge. Importantly, the Act also mandates greater residential engagement, and leaseholders must be kept informed about any building safety issues and how costs are being managed, and includes a legal obligation for an accountable person to establish and maintain resident engagement. So while it doesn't give residents or leaseholders or customers direct legal power to approve any changes, it does give them clearer rights really to request information and have oversight of any processes that block managers are doing. And this increases the needs for clarity and auditability in how that service charge costs are documented and how those are then relayed to tenants and clients. Moving on from that, we've then got tenant expectations arising, as we've discussed. So with more leaseholders becoming more informed and more vocal, managing agents must now be able to provide detailed and accurate timely breakdowns of any charges and costs that are incurred. So really, leaseholders want to see and understand how their money is being spent and what that money is being spent on. So the regulatory landscape reinforces this, and as a result requires more rigorous documentation and transparency. And as previously mentioned around the MRI Property Leaders Forum, we had discussions there that really reinforced this point. So with senior executives, they were noting that resident activism is driving a new level of scrutiny on all aspects of their financial operations. And the demand is not just for transparency, really, but for real-time responsiveness and digital accessibility. On top of all of that, we recognise that every property or tenant or leaseholder may require a different schedule, different correspondence. Multiply that by dozens or hundreds of buildings and the complexity becomes very clear. So without any automation or integrations or having that single source of truth of data, process and delays and allocation errors and staff frustrations can then be inevitable. So something else to consider is that there also appears to be a growing skill gap in the industry at the moment. So once again, data from a recent industry survey, which was conducted by and also commented on by our managing director, Dan Forocheski, has revealed that not only property accounting teams are understaffed, but they also risk losing a generation of experienced staff as well. So this would have a knock-on effect of knowledge loss within the business, of course, and increased pressure on remaining staff, but also then pose a potential risk to operational resilience. If complexities in the industry to continue to rise without information being digitized or without automated systems, then even basic compliance becomes a resource intensive burden. And we've got a few statistics here around things like the vacancy rate increasing in accounting roles. As mentioned, a lot of those staff members are leaving that have a lot of experience and are taking that with them elsewhere or out of the industry. And we see that around 50% may leave or are undecided within the next 3 years. So a lot of sort of statistics from that recent survey, once again, which were commented on by our managing director. So, and also, I guess, as part of that property leaders forum, many property leaders and block managers have said they're actively seeking ways to reduce reliance on those manual processes to start to safeguard against any recruitment risks they see going forward. Now let's look at some of those potential challenges that people are finding with processing invoices and reporting on any service charge, as well as how that can lead to approval bottlenecks and blockers in the payment process. And later down the line, how that can also then start to impact even client reporting and that end of year reconciliation process. So let's start with the issues with manual processing. Now, we've got a few examples on screen of how some of those key issues that arise with manual data entry. And some of these may seem fairly obvious, but the knock-on effects can prove costly to block managers. And this isn't just with invoice processing, which we're covering today, but any manual routines are starting to provide a lot of problems and a lot of issues for many within the real estate industry. So manual entry can lead to incorrect cost coding, of course, as well as cost allocations when you're processing those service charge invoices. And the initial effects will be, of course, on that reconciliation to leaseholders, as there may well be discrepancies in year-end balancings and apportionments that are carried out. But that will also then lead to inaccurate reports to clients. So particularly when reporting on income and expenditure or budget versus actual and variance reporting, those end of year packs and reports that they're having to be collated, if there's errors, if there's manual entry down the line, then that's only going to affect that when those reports are generated. The end result really for service charge accountants or people in the industry is that lots of time is then wasted correcting those errors, either during the approval stage or even more time is spent if that invoice has already been paid and accounted for, then things have to be reversed and things have to be rejournaled. And then on top of that, they'll need to recalculate the leaseholder charges, which could be something that's a manual process right now, and then report on any spend changes to the client. So lots of knock-on effects, lots of issues, and lots of wasted time for people. Once again, if there's staff shortages, then that's only going to increase. Alongside that, so it's not just manual entry that's causing delays to service charge processes. It's also having maybe potentially a complex and paper-based approval process are also causing some of those issues up the chain. So approvals are, of course, essential when tracking and allocating expenditure. They're necessary. Everyone needs to get eyes on and visibility of spend. But a long and drawn out approval chain with minimal visibility can really lead to late posting and payments to suppliers. And if this process is also paper-based, then there is an increased risk of those documents being lost, potentially being misplaced. And while kind of going through that approval process, it then becomes a lot harder to collate that information, collate those documents when doing any reporting for clients at year end or reporting your accounts, getting audited. If you're losing track of all those invoices and they have to be collated manually as part of that process, then that's going to make that issue a lot bigger. And what all this leads to is not just a delay in the reconciliation process, as we mentioned previously, but which many leaseholders are now expecting to have quickly and accurately as part of those expectations. But it also means that there's a risk of meeting some of those client deadlines. And there's an increased risk in reporting and getting that information out a lot quicker. Once again, if paper invoices are harder to find, then it makes collating those year-end reporting packs a whole lot difficult. Putting that burden back on the block managers when trying to potentially win new business and sell their services in the industry. If those reports are wrong and they're not providing for their existing clients, it's going to be a lot harder to win business moving forward. Now we see we've got a lack of real-time visibility. So as with any business process, not just invoice approval, if teams are working in silos and they're not sharing data and it's not visible across the business or across various teams, it makes that process a lot harder and more difficult to track. If it becomes difficult to see and track invoices across the portfolio, check coding information, or maybe make any corrections, then reporting actuals to tenants will become a lot harder and much less accurate during that time. As with the other challenges we've discussed, this ultimately leads to issues at year end, as they all seem to do, once again, when reporting to clients or leaseholders and giving them the information they expect to have, as well as maybe budgeting for next year if spend numbers are inaccurate or if people don't have visibility of that when you're trying to budget and account for next year and generate those on account charges. Those are going to be less accurate and less reflective of how the costs have been allocated in the current year. Really, if everyone has visibility of this process, then these things are less likely to be missed. So next, we'll look at, once again, how those kind of hidden impacts of staff and experience shortages is also something that's affecting this process. So as I mentioned earlier, when discussing some of those industry challenges, there's now a 27% increase in those vacancies in staff roles and those accounting roles. Once again, with a lot of those roles and people leaving are people with a lot of experience and understanding of the industry and moving on potentially. So that's really leaving to smaller teams, smaller accounting teams that are still having to manage a high workload and process all those invoices, but now with less experience and less resource available. So that's only going to lead to slower processing when pushing invoices through and reporting at year end. Really, that's going to increase the burden on current staff, potentially might make people want to leave or move out if they're struggling with their jobs, and that's only going to increase that staff shortage. Or potentially that burden might get passed on to some of the senior staff. So some people that have to actually get involved in the approval process or the corrections process when their time could be better spent elsewhere. Once again, as part of losing staff, bringing on new staff is then going to be a high cost and a time constraint to bring on new starters, to retrain new starters within the industry, to try and get people with that experience is always hard. The costs are going to increase. Once again, it's going to be hard to recruit and get the right people into the business to fill those gaps and to help with this kind of process. And then, as you see, once again, number 4, manual processing risk will only be amplified from that. So less team, less people in the team, less staff, harder to retrain, less experience, the cost of bringing in any new starters, and also those manual processing risks is only going to lead to harder and harder difficulties within the industry and for block managers and those accountants. So we've talked a lot about some of those issues and potential problems, but really let's try and focus a lot on how AI and machine learning and AP automation can really start to help those problems and how it's helping not just clients we have, but other people in the industry to battle and combat those issues that they're seeing. So AI, of course, is a bit of a buzzword right now. So we're seeing just not with our client base, but also across the industry that people are noticing some real tangible benefits when bringing AI, machine learning, and automation into the AP process. So really, it's once again starting to replace some of that repetitive work that we're seeing. Really, that's kind of where AI is being best used across the industry, not just to get the processing done quicker, but also to improve data capture, to help meet some of those compliance goals, and also to help future-proof by taking steps to achieve a paperless process and a paperless invoicing process. And of course, we're in where there is automation involved, that can help to ease the burden on some of the existing staff, as well as help reduce the staffing risks we've mentioned that are affecting the block management sector. And these are tools that aren't coming down the line. These are tools that are available now. Once again, there's already tools out there on the market from providers like Tungsten and Proactis, to name a few, many of which are integrated to existing accounting and property management solutions. So not just providing AI automation and streamlining that invoicing process, but also giving that single source of truth with integrated platforms so everyone has visibility of that data. So firstly, AI and automation. So as I've kind of mentioned previously, AI really is there to start to replace some of that repetitive and manual work that we're seeing. So particularly around invoice coding and matching invoices to purchase orders. That's where some of the key time saving is found within AI coding. And in many cases, that's helping to improve accuracy. You know, if you have one person that's coding maybe 100 invoices, it's a lot more likely that things are going to be missed. Whereas if you start to have machine learning tools that are going in, that can also start to improve the accuracy, and using OCR to extract all of those key data points will only help with that. So really, AP automation tools are starting to become essential as part of this process to bring the data in quickly, but then leading into that approval process. You know, AI tools are brilliant, and there's lots of tools that are going to help this process, but really they're still going to be feeding in. You're still going to have that human in the loop that's going to be verifying that data. So although it's bringing in that data into accounting solutions or property solutions quicker, and it helps speed up that process, it also means that when it goes into any approvals, you've still got that human check, but it's going to get there a lot quicker. Also, data capture. So once again, AI machine learning, it's going to keep learning and getting better over time, and it's going to be better at extracting those key data from invoices. So once again, also going to be used to validate and get more accurate information from invoices, match those to purchase orders, and start to learn that information a lot quicker. And one thing we're seeing is that's also starting to help reduce any disputes. Rather than people having to chase up and find out who's processing an invoice, where that's coming from, who that's currently sitting with, if that's then coming through and being scanned into any solution and getting extracted, and we're utilizing machine learning to get that data quickly, starting to help reduce those disputes and give people more visibility on extraction and that process. And really, by speeding up the extraction process at the start of any AP approval process, it leaves more time for the actual business leaders or service charge accountants or property managers to actually go through and approve those invoices when they come into any solution. So leaving more time for that end bit of approvals, more checks, is only going to help speed up when bringing those invoices in and getting that to a reporting stage at year end. Not just machine learning and AI, though, obviously those tools are important, but also having a good automated approval workflow in place is always going to help with any service charge accounting and year-end reporting. So having rule-based workflows, having different rules in place, different approval matrix set up, whether an invoice is over a certain amount of money, does it need to go to additional members to be approved? If those rule-based workflows are already in place, then once the AI is extracted or the key data from the invoice and that comes into a solution, you've got those rule-based workflows and it already knows who that invoice needs to go to. It already knows which team member it needs to sit with. So rather than an accounts person doing the manual coding and then allocating out or potentially even handing a paper invoice to someone for them to check, having those rule-based workflows is going to help to streamline that process. And that benefit is already being seen by a number of our clients and people within the industry. And as you can see, that's also going to reduce approval bottlenecks. You're not going to have to ask around the office and find out where invoices might be sitting. You've got one single source of truth. You've got one place where you can see not just the invoice, but also maybe the approval workflow, who has seen and approved that invoice. You're going to have that all in one place for people to verify as well. And then finally, not just in the invoice process as we've spoken about, but having a paperless process across any business is always going to help to future proof. We really are once again starting to move away from having the need for paper invoices, paper approvals, or paper processes in any business. So having that in one place, having one single source of truth, and making it fully digital is always going to help to future proof a business as times move on. And once again, this is something people are doing within the industry and what a lot of our clients are doing right now. A key benefit and a sort of a key thing we're looking as well is at compliance and transparency. So once again, by having a paperless and digital invoice process and having that traceable within a solution, that's going to mean that when you're then going to inform the tenant or inform a client at year end, you've got the ability to trace back to the original source of truth. You've got not just the data that maybe might have been extracted and being approved in the solution, but you've also got copies of the documents digitized and they're available to all teams. So helping to not just give better information to the leaseholder and meet their expectations that a lot of leaseholders have right now, but also reduce the time that is taken to actually inform them and then also invoice them of any charges. If we're getting expenditure into the system and approving it quicker, we can then start to invoice and set up balancing charges for those leaseholders. Also, a clear audit trail of any approvals, of any changes, recoding, also that journey that the invoice has taken within any solution. If that's all digitized and clear, then that makes for easier compliance reporting and also makes it easier to bring all those invoices together when you're being audited as a business or you're reporting to clients and you have to report on those statistics and figures. And of course, faster and more accurate reporting to clients when you're creating budget versus actuals, income and expenditure reports, all of those core financial reports that they might need. If you've got the invoices, you've got the accurate spend, and all that information is in one place, that's only going to speed up that process. Once again, leading to maybe easier certification, ability to win new business and increase in the industry. That's only going to lead to benefits there. Also, having automation and machine learning tools in place is only going to help to reduce those staff risks. So once again, having the right tech in place, having the right tech stack is only going to enable those difficult and stretched teams to handle larger volumes. So once again, something we're seeing with a lot of our clients is if they're bringing in the right solutions, rather than having to increase headcount to deal with increasing portfolios and more blocks they're bringing online, if they're utilizing tech correctly, they can still keep a small team, but actually manage and deal with a larger portfolio and deal with the problems that may arise from that as well. So already saving money on headcount and helping to future-proof their operations from any additional spend. Once again, that digital invoice, that digital workflow process, and having all that information in one place is only going to help them future-proof moving forward. It also protects against any knowledge that might be leaving. So once again, if you've got those automated tools in place, you're not needing and relying on people that have a lot of experience in the industry, and you're not having to rely on them too much. You're relying on the systems that you use. It means that if knowledge is leaving or people are moving on, you're having to retrain. It helps to prevent against that and protect against that issue moving forward. And then finally, as we mentioned previously, it's also going to help free up maybe senior people from having to do those manual checks and tasks, if they're noticing issues in reporting, rather than have to go back and kind of get involved in approvals and do any corrections and manage that themselves. They're relying on tech as well as their team more to be able to complete those checks and do those approvals. And that data is going to be more accurate, meaning that any senior people in the business can be more focused on how can they serve their leaseholders, how can they serve for their clients, how can they win more business going forward and continue that process. And I guess the final point to really focus on is I've mentioned it a few times in the session today, but having that single source of truth is really the utopia that all businesses want to strive towards, not just for block managers. Having all that information in one place, whether that is property information, whether that's service charge information, whether that's all your accounting data, having that all in one place and having integrated solutions and streamlined workflows is really going to help any business moving forward. Crucially, with things like invoices, when they come into the solution, if they're matching to purchase orders that are already being raised, if they're then going straight in and pulling descriptions into service charge reporting and reporting to clients or leaseholders, once again, having that information in one place is crucial for that any kind of matching and speeding up of that process. What we're also seeing, once again, by having a seamlessly integrated and one solution and one platform where all the data is being pushed to, is there's going to be no double entry of financial data. You're not entering data into one platform and then having to duplicate that again into another platform, or write information down or take a copy of a paper invoice and then type that into a property system or an account system. By having the integrated solutions and those automated workflows, it's removing that need for any double entry of financial data. Of course, that's then going to lead to accurate posting into service charge accounts. If we've got streamlined processes, if we've got AI tools that are doing a lot of the data capture and have those machine learnings in place, that's going to mean that property descriptions or invoice descriptions, line items, purchase order numbers, key dates, that's going to be taken down more quickly and accurately. And then when it goes into the service charge account, there's going to be less need for corrections, for changes needing to be made, and hopefully going to make it more accurate as part of that process. And then really the final point, what all of the block managers really strive for is they want to be able to win new business. They want to be able to serve their clients effectively. They want to future-proof their business so that they're an attractive prospect for any people that are looking to market blocks or looking to bring on new business. That's really what everyone wants to achieve. So by having that integrated PM solution, by having all of the invoice process streamlined and getting that data captured quickly, is only going to mean that you're reporting to leaseholders and giving them the transparency they need, whether that's via emails or through a portal. You're able to give them the information that they require for the Building Safety Act and all the key details and around spend and expenditure. But crucially then also to clients that you manage on behalf of. They know their blocks are being managed quickly and efficiently. They know they've got all the key data they need. They've got information around what they're spending, what budgeting they need to do, all of the money that might be remitted up to them. That's all going to be done quickly and efficiently. So it's only going to help companies to win business moving forward. So I appreciate everyone's time today and thank you for joining. That's really everything I had to discuss. I hope everyone found the session today useful and enjoyed everything. But yeah, if there's any questions, happy to take them now if there's any in the chat. But yeah, I'll pass over to Vicky to end the session.
Hi, Alistair. Thank you. That was brilliant. I can't see any questions at the moment. I'll just give it a moment though to see if anyone wants to submit anything now before we finish off.
Sure.
Okay, there's one question that's just come in. It says, "What is your appetite for integration with other systems, for example, Dwellent?"
Yeah, so I guess speaking solely from an MRI perspective, we're a business that's always, I guess, if you look at any of our marketing online, we always stay open and connected. We're always happy to integrate to other solutions, and a lot of our platforms, which are web enabled, are able to do that. So, yeah, your example being Dwellent is definitely examples of a product we maybe have integrated in the past. So we're always happy to have those conversations. So as long as the other provider is willing to integrate as well, then that's something we're definitely able to do. Rather than providing those two siloed sets of data, we want to make sure it's one integrated platform at the end of the day.
Okay, great. I think that's the only question we've got at the moment. So, as I say, that's always a great sign. I think it means you've probably covered everything already.
Hopefully so.
Oh, sorry, there is one more.
Sure.
It's a similar question, but talking about a different platform. For example, Blockman. Um,
Yeah, so I guess Blockman is a good example because a lot of the solutions we sell, particularly property management, Blockman do a lot of the same things. So it'd be good to understand what data you want to share between maybe Blockman and MRI solution, as some of the ones tend to do the same things, or whether that's something you'd want to maybe just keep in Blockman or move over to MRI. So there'd be a good discussion to have with either MRI ourselves or an existing account manager to find out what data you want to share and where we could best do that. But once again, always happy to integrate where
Yeah,
needed.
I think those questions maybe is probably better if they contact you directly to see what they're
Absolutely, yeah,
actually looking for and what's the
yeah.
possibility. So there's another question. Will you consider a light version of MRI PM for a smaller agent?
Good question. Yeah, so I mean, I'm guessing potentially sort of MRI QPM might be one of the products that they're mentioning. Yeah, I mean, if there is an appetite in the industry, we'd always be something we look to kind of push towards and achieve. I don't know the roadmap and what is kind of on target for the business off the top of my head, but yeah, if there is a need in the market for light versions of products or simple property databases or simple solutions, then that's something we'd always look to move into if we can.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, all right. I think we can finish up there. That's the only questions that we have. Thank you so much for your time, Alistair. That was brilliant.
No worries,
Thank
thank you.
you to everyone who joined us today. As I mentioned, the webinar has been recorded, so if anyone wants to go back over anything, you can do that via the News on the Block YouTube. Otherwise, if you want to get in touch with Alistair or MRI, I think his details were on the slides, but if you want to get in touch, you can drop me an email and I can put you in touch with him directly. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I will see you on the next webinar. Have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.